Hello and welcome to Random Offense. I am your host, Ethan Strauss. Here we talk about sports, politics, culture, all sorts of good stuff. And we have got a great show for all of you. We will be joined by Ryan Glasspiegel of Front Office Sports. He is, in my opinion, the best sports media reporter out there. He will deny it, but you and I, we agree. We can keep that secret at least, or at least agree on it, and maybe even bully him into admitting it. We'll see down the road. But first, our anchor topic, our little mini monologue. And I've got a quote right here. I want to make sure the quote is exactly accurate. So let me look at the monitor. Let me read it. Let me make sure I have this right. The quote says, "It didn't help for me to get personal with Riley, which I apologize for." That is from one Simone Biles, the superstar gymnast. Yes, you have heard of her. She is referring to Riley Gaines, a conservative activist. Now, this quote right here, I find to be an interesting cultural marker. This is somebody walking back criticism of a conservative, a high status celebrity, a celebrity celebrated by many progressive people, an athlete. And this is the sort of thing that you just would not see happen a few short years ago. Unimaginable in 2021, for instance, and the years before that. The origins of it have to do with a dispute that happened last week over the transports issue. That's the main focus of Riley Gaines, who was a swimmer who went up against Leah Thomas, and this became her main cause. Simone Biles went after Riley Gaines, making a mockery, making light of Gaines's appearance, saying something to the effect of, you should pick on somebody your own size, which would ironically be a male. That's just my memory of that exact quote. Forgive me if it's a paraphrase. Now, this is the sort of thing that if Biles had said this 2021, I am convinced, I cannot prove it, people, but I am convinced there would be no pressure she would feel to walk back anything, to apologize for anything. Mostly what you would see would be hosannas, would be in media, people celebrating this kind of smackdown that she was giving to a conservative activist in protection of trans people. So the big question before us is why? Why? Why now? Why does she feel compelled to walk back something? Why does she feel compelled to apologize? Now, I have a simple theory as to why. It's so simple, you might even call it stupid. Maybe Ryan, when we bring him on, will disagree with me. Maybe you will disagree with me. You can call in, by the way. You can ask questions. Our trusty producer, Trace Crutchfield, can get you to do so. But my theory, Ryan, on this, my theory, it's just Twitter, man. It's just Twitter. And that's my theory because when I clicked on it, when I looked at what Biles said, I saw a dog pile. I saw high follower accounts going after Biles, and I saw J.K. Rowling getting in on the conversation. And I thought to myself, if this was a few years ago, it would be the other way. It would be high follower accounts, all applauding, all joining the pylon. And that's what this is, man. You change the medium, you change who owns the medium, you change what athletes and celebrities feel comfortable saying, what they will proudly say, and what they will reveal to the world. So that's my theory, Ryan. Is it something else? Does it have to do with brands? You tell me.
I do think that there's been a vibe shift, and I think the ownership change of Twitter X going to Elon Musk does play a big factor in that because I don't know that the responses would have necessarily been much different in 2021. It still would have been a lot of the same people, like, quote, dogpiling on Simone Biles, but the weight of how much people see might be different. Like, so when you click on a Biles tweet and see the responses, there's like some unseeable algorithm with its thumb on the scale choosing the reach and
Yes.
um amplifying things that would be negative responses to Biles and hiding the responses that would have been affirmative to her. And maybe 4 years ago, it would have been the opposite. And so I don't necessarily think that the people on Twitter have changed, although a big part of the Biles supporter contingent in this type of story maybe has just left Twitter and gone to Blue Sky, or maybe they're not posting on social media as aggressively. But Yeah, it just changes what you see, and that's a big change in the psychology of the person who is looking at all of her responses.
That's what I'm saying. I really think a lot of it is that simple. Some of it is headlines. Obviously, we've seen corporations worry about their focus groups and their customers and everything else. Bud Light being a particularly notable instance. But I do think a lot of these athletes and celebrities, they log on, they post, and whatever the response is reality to them. That's the reality. It's what's happening in the phone. So if my phone is shrieking at me, I go, oh my God, I messed up. Where's my PR team? I'm not saying I know this happened with Biles. I'm just saying this is generally true. But, if it's back in the day and they strike a certain note in the direction of a certain ideology and it's all just a tsunami of praise, again, I'm not talking about Biles specifically, but a lot of these people, frankly, Ryan, they're not that deep. They're not like you and me, man. We're very deep.
We're
These
like
people, these
onions. We have
actors,
lots
these
of layers.
celebrities,
I'm I'm about to get myself in trouble a little bit with the
do it.
right here. We
Okay.
get accused of being right leaning or whatever, but how annoying is Riley Gaines? She's got one take and she is like rocketed up this one hit. It's like a one hit wonder that stays on top of the Billboard charts for like several years with that one hit. She has not like developed a second pitch. And it's just like she's railing against trans in sports. She does it with a nasty tone and
Mm,
like, so there's a lot of people of her ilk, and I don't know if she has said this specifically, that will attribute this trans dysphoria as like mental illness. Well, if that's what she thinks, then she's out here just like throwing out pictures and names of like teenage kids that she thinks are mentally ill and broadcasting them to like millions of people and taking like this like I understand that the big story is like how it's unfair for girls to have to compete against these trans athletes, and we've talked about this a
yeah.
number of times, but the way in which she does it and the attention that she's gotten frankly has been nauseating to me.
This is an interesting take. I like this distinction right here because this was the origins of Biles versus Gaines, is that Biles put one of these photos out of one of these
Gaines put one of the
teenage.
photos up.
Oh, no, sorry, yeah, good correction, by the way. That a very good correction there. Gaines put one of the photos out of one of the competitors, and yeah, that opens this conversation up. Is that right? And if you think it's a mental disorder, then you're exposing this person all this attention. The contrary view would be, of course, then how do you even talk about these egregious examples without doing such a thing? But let's set this aside. I feel you on Gaines. I do. I don't dislike her. I acknowledge that it's an 80-20 issue, and I guess I'm broadly with her cause in that respect, but I don't think she's the deepest person. I don't know why we're talking about depth. I don't know why that's the theme of this show, but I saw a clip of her talking with Bill Maher, and I apologize if this is an incorrect recapitulation of what happened, but Maher mentioned Jimmy Carter at one point, and Gaines revealed that she did not know who that was. And at that point, I just went, I'm out. I'm out. I'm out. Maybe that's unfair. Maybe she understands this issue perfectly well. But it's just hard for me to take somebody seriously if they don't know who Jimmy Carter is. I know that Gaines is younger than I am. And I just say that as an aside because somebody who is with, let's just call it the trans movement, who might absolutely hate Gaines and hate J.K. Rowling with the same sort of fervor and put them in the same bucket, they are not the same. J.K. Rowling, whatever you think of her, has a depth to her and is saying many interesting things on this issue and is making all sorts of arguments. I just don't.
And
I
she's
think there's
wildly
a.
accomplished.
Yes, obviously very accomplished. I think sometimes when somebody's an activist, they can, as you're saying, just they become very one note as opposed to being a fully fleshed out personality. And so I don't disagree with you on that one, Ryan. I don't.
Nancy has her hand up for
Oh,
a
Nancy
question.
Rommelman? Nancy's already in? Okay, we'll take a question from Nancy. Let's take a question from Nancy.
Guys. Hey
I
guys,
can hear.
I can you hear me? Yes. Okay.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
So I don't know a whole lot about her except like kind of what I see in passing. I think the larger problem here for someone like her who becomes the sort of like flashpoint for the issue of the day is the incentive structure. She's greatly incentivized to be that person, and she's incentivized by corporations and by our clicking. And we kind of have, people have to resist those incentives. She's young, she's dumb, I guess, in terms of not realizing that she shouldn't just say, like, yeah, that's going to be my issue, because that issue is going to change. Not that I do believe it's an 80-20 issue. I think she's, in the main right about things, but then she's forced to constantly like double down and be that person, which seems like a terrible straitjacket to be in for a young person.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we see another example of this with Greta Thunberg, where it was all about climate activism. And then there's almost addiction. It's a strange thing because it's addiction to a certain kind of attention, but then that attention is also your identity. And it's in this contentious pose where you're fighting and you're fighting for what's right in your mind. And next thing you know, you're on a flotilla to Gaza or whatever she's doing that wasn't about the thing she was doing before. And pity the activist. Maybe that's one of the takeaways from our show.
That's right. You also have to, if you're known for that thing, you're going to get people on the extreme edges of that thing wanting you to actually like, oh, you believe in my message. Oh, hey, come on my show. And like, you really don't. And then you become more of like an enemy to the mainstream, which is probably not her objective to begin with. So
yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, she's succeeding wildly in this. I mean, I don't know what her social media following is, but it's very large. She
1.5 million Twitter followers is my interjection.
Yeah, and she's going on national TV shows on Fox News, which is, other than like NFL, more watched than basically anything on TV. And so it is, to your point, Nancy, this incentive structure is rewarding her, but I liken it to like a 100-mile-an-hour young flamethrower pitcher. Like, he's got to develop another pitch, or he's going to have to get Tommy John surgery and he's going to be out for 2 years. Like, at some point, she's going to fall on deaf ears.
You know what? I might disagree with you guys if that's allowed. I know that's very bad.
Oh, no. We
in
just
a panel show to disagree.
We have to be a monoculture here.
Yeah, I might disagree with you guys. I mean, I agree with Pity the activist. I agree with that, but she might not have to throw another pitch. I think this is a more bottom-up movement. The sports participation, the trans sports movement, whatever you want to call it. I do think it's more bottom up than top down. I think the Democratic Party and the various superstructures would like to move on from this. They think it's a political loser. They don't want to continue on. And while they might not have the stomach to pass legislation right now to bar males from participating in women's sports, it's something that they're not actively encouraging, and yet it keeps happening. And so this is the sort of thing where there might always be a dog to catch. I don't know why I'm making her a dog catcher, Riley Gaines, but there might always be this cause for the rest of our lives, and she never has to develop another pitch, and she'll just grow in fame and notoriety for this, and we can roll our eyes as these nuanced thinkers that we think we are, but she's just going to keep on succeeding with this. I think it's possible.
No, there's an end point to it. I mean, the end point is, like, I don't know if it's allowed in women's tennis or the WNBA. Clay Travis put out a bounty of like $250,000 for a biological male to make it into the WNBA, which apparently, I mean, isn't banned. But when that happened, I don't know. That seemed to be his belief in putting up that bounty. But the moment it happens in a national popular sport, and it happened with Leah Thomas at Penn in swimming, but I think that's just under the threshold of really creating the snowball. Like, if it happened in the equivalent of like the WNBA or women's tennis, then I think it just comes to an end.
I'll take an extreme example here, but I think we've all seen the videos of Frankie Valli, who looks now like an animatronic person that they kind of like roll up to the front of the stage, and he's not even really singing the songs. They're just putting him up there because he's that guy that basically provides them with money. So he's
Mm.
just going to stand there and mouth along to the words. That's a terrible fate. I'm not saying that that's going to happen with Riley, but if you're only known for that, the people that are going to want to support you, I think, are going to shrink if it's just this one thing, until they're just going to need you to do what they say that they want you to do. Plus, what young person doesn't want to branch out? Doesn't want
Mm.
to be known for other ideas and meet other people and not just keep having the same conversations. It's boring.
I didn't anticipate this, but this live show is becoming it's becoming an intervention for the activist Riley Gaines. Riley, we're not against you necessarily, but we think you've become one note. We don't think it's good for you to be so one note. We need you to learn who Jimmy Carter is and develop a few more positions, become a more well-rounded activist. We're not saying that you need to have the kind of tenacity and knowledge of a Chris Rufo on the conservative side, but just maybe a few more issues. So that's our intervention. Now, we'll wrap up this topic with what we began with, which is where is this coming from? Where is the vibe shift coming from? Is it institutional? Is it political? Oh, we lost Nancy. We'll get Nancy later if she wants a question. And that's the main thing I'm wondering. This ineffable vibe shift in the air, Ryan. And sometimes people tell me that there's a shift against the vibe shift. What percentage is the Twitter changeover in 2022 in the vibe shift? If we're doing
Well, I
title
mean,
pie of it.
it all comes together because, like, what percent is the COVID lockdowns? What percent is the inflation? What percent is Trump barnstorming back and winning the election? What percent is like whatever was going on with Joe Biden that caused him to get pulled from the election and Kamala Harris to get put in when there wasn't a real primary? And there are all these things that work together that I don't
Enough of
think
your
you can.
nuance, sir. Give me a percentage, damn it.
It's difficult. It's not a single variable equation, and they all are. It's like a stew where they all mix together and
Mm.
form one big dish. And I guess, like, if you're looking at like what is how much is Twitter the most prominent ingredient and tasteable ingredient in the stew,
Yeah.
then I guess I will go 60%.
Yeah, if it's Vietnamese noodle soup, then the Twitter changeover is fish sauce. I'm not sure what I'm going with, but it's an ingredient that seems to be palpable and noticeable in every single bite. And I guess that is what I am saying on this particular issue. Some
And
accuse me of overemphasizing the Twitter factor, but I think it's absolutely huge
I
culturally.
have one more thing about Riley Gaines, and then we
Say
can
it.
move on. And I know that we just gave a lot of attention to her. So who are we to say don't pay any attention? Because we just did for
Yeah,
15 minutes.
you
But
got
like,
us.
Mina Kimes, Katie Nolan, Simone Biles, like, if you don't respond to her, then she doesn't have a week's worth of oxygen to parade around with your scalp when you have to apologize.
Yeah, I think that's fairly good advice for people countering gains, I suppose, or people in general. And look, we're just observers. We try to be dispassionately passionate here, Ryan. We might have our opinions, but we don't like to necessarily be these active participants in the cultural battlefield. So let's take it to somewhere a little less ideological. Let's take it to the NBA Finals. Last week with Big Waz on, we discussed some of the televising, but I feel as though some of our bugaboos, some of our fixations, Ryan, are becoming more mainstream. The complaints we have had, I'm seeing other people have them. LeBron James, we're often disagreeing with LeBron or not liking some sort of way he comports himself. But recently, he was saying some things that I think we both would agree with. On his Mind the Game podcast with Steve Nash, he was complaining about the presentation of the NBA Finals and how there's no storytelling. I would agree. I would say that's a problem. It seems as though there's been a critical mass reached on this issue where everybody is complaining about why the finals look like they do, what the ESPN product looks like, and are blaming it for dragging down the NBA brand and decreasing interest in the product. Do you think this is fair, Ryan? Do you think ESPN shares some culpability? And for a teaser, Later on, there will be an example of this perhaps in our HR, not HR segment regarding Stephen A. Smith, but that's for later.
Ooh, that's what they call foreshadowing and a
Mm-hmm.
tease in the
Yes,
business.
yes, yes.
It's tough to blame ESPN entirely because, for example, like there's all these complaints about the pageantry that have just come to light where they're not painting the finals or the Larry O'Brien trophy decal on the court anymore, and there's all these ads. And it's interesting with ESPN because they had more time to make Gilgeous Alexander and to a lesser extent Tyrese Halliburton into narratives that people could get behind. SGA was not a top 5 pick. He's on his second team. Halliburton wasn't recruited by major schools out of college until he got to Iowa State at like the 11th hour. I mean, out of high school into college. And he was not one of the most like highly touted prospects. These are people who they weren't like LeBron James on the SI cover at 16. You should be able to kind of get behind the way they worked and persevered and built themselves onto having the stage, especially Gilgeous Alexander because he's the MVP this year, and the Thunder have been like the finals favorites for a lot of the seasons. So they had a lot of time to see this one coming, but the problem is that he doesn't have this like flashy personality that they can use to book a story behind, and they've struggled to just book stories based on basketball talent.
Yeah, not everybody's overtly interesting. They had Tim Duncan back in the day when there was more pageantry and more of a classic storytelling tradition, and they couldn't really sell it. He didn't want to participate. Some people are like that, but I think that the complainers are getting at something real. I think there's something about the ESPN product that always feels a little bit more like a withdrawal than an investment. A little bit more, we're trying to seize the headline or grab your attention, then try to cultivate some sort of sense of connection. And this isn't just about the NBA product. This has been a complaint for a while. There was that book, These Guys Have All the Fun, about ESPN. And that came out, man, I don't know if it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago,
15 at least, yeah.
something like that. But the guy who wrote the book was making that criticism and observation and was saying that, look, when ABC, ESPN, when they got Monday Night Football, when Monday Night Football went to ESPN, it immediately decreased in status. And all of a sudden on NBC, with all the grandeur and production that they have, that elevated in status. Many would point out that that's because they got better games on NBC. And that's true. But it was also just, insofar as something subjective like that can be objective, it was just objectively better done. And there's something about the whole ESPN experience that feels slapdash. It feels crass. The discussions around the game, it doesn't feel like they care about quality. Just something's rotten in the state of ESPN ABC, and it does have an impact in how the league is represented.
Yeah, but inside the NBA has the same kind of look at meism. We just like them. And so it is it's a very tricky thing, chemistry and likability and feeling like you're hanging out with these TV people through the screen when like they are on the other side of a television and they are better than you. And so Charles Barkley makes $20 million a year. Shaq says he's done watching the finals and he's going fishing somewhere, and it's like, there's Shaq being funny. It's just, we like them better, and so we don't get like the audience doesn't get as annoyed with them as they might get with like a Stephen A. Smith like challenging himself to some type of like unwinnable duel with Tyrese Halliburton. And so
That's for later. That's the foreshadow, Ryan. We can't step all over it. I mean, look, I haven't really made use of this little chat feature because I'm always trying to get people to actually physically call in, but we've got some text. We've got some text right here.
And
I'm
we've
looking
got
over.
and we've got Travis here who wants to ask a question and come on
Oh,
board
okay.
right
Well,
now.
let's get
Also,
Travis.
one other thing you might not have seen is in the YouTube chat, there's a request to get to the Halaban storyline that we covered last time, which
Yeah,
was
yeah.
is kind of a fun thing to just touch on for sure.
Oh yeah, we're pro Halaban as a nickname, but let's bring on Travis Clark here. Let's bring him on.
Hey, you guys can hear and see me okay?
Oh
Yes.
yeah. Hey,
Cool. Hey, how's it
welcome.
going?
Yeah.
Good. Two things. One, I'm in your BCC chat. I was the one who had the hot take that the Pacers would win this. Looking pretty
Hey,
good right
don't get
now.
overconfident. It's good, but hey,
They're
it's
still plus 250 underdogs or whatever, so I wouldn't spike the football just yet.
yeah.
I'm just saying, look,
Okay.
I bought I'm in California, so the way I sports bet has to be through like buying shares of yes, they win, but hey, I'm pretty far up. Um, So I did have one thing on your sport. I actually totally agree, by the way, with the story thing. They're dropping the ball on that. I do think there is a yes and here, and that is
Mm.
for SGA particularly in terms of like not being able to market him. His game sucks. It is
Ooh.
very it is very effective. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's bad. What I'm saying is it's infuriating, especially to like my dad's generation. He wasn't a big basketball fan, but like other people were. And if you back in the day when you had Tim Duncan, yes, his game was boring, but my dad's generation respected it, right? It was like, yeah, he's got the fundamentals. SGA is foul baiting like Harden levels. And it's so infuriating to watch for so many people, including myself. Maybe I'm biased
Mm.
here, but I think that's part of it. It's just like, how do we do this? Like you said, not a great like the personality isn't all that interesting, and also the game. Halliburton's game is fun. It's interesting. His is just like really. We're just. I'm just gonna like move into every single person to get to bait the foul, and people just really don't like it.
Yeah, I
So
think there's
if you
something
were
to it.
ESPN, how would you present it?
If I
Oh,
was
I would.
ES, well, I just wanted to say, I just wanted to jump in there. I had this instinct from my old profession, NBA writer, where I wanted to beat back pretentiously against Travis, even though he's totally right, and go, "You just don't understand the nuances of his game, and you just need to get it." But let's hear it. Maybe you have a way, Travis. How would you sell this guy that you hate, who you think has a game that is anti-charismatic? What should they do?
So Ryan will love this. You might not. You got to do the wrestling thing. Turn
Mm,
him into a
Oh
heel.
God.
Turn him into a heel. Make
I
him
like it.
make him an asshole. Like just do
Well,
it.
he has to win first because the whole
Uh,
story of the way the heel archetype works is you need a baby face on the chase, and so
Mm.
he
mm,
needs to be the champion before you can make him a heel. But I think that that's coming.
you think it's
Maybe
coming?
here's what I would do
Hmm.
if I want to make him the heel. I would have Adam Silver set him down, offer some reward, and go, when you get fouled, we need you to have a celebration dance specifically for that.
Yes.
Specifically.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you got to lean into it. If this is his game, fine. I mean, I'm not going to sit there and tell him how to play basketball. He's way better than me. But like, you have to understand this is an entertainment industry, and if people have a certain perception, it's not your job to like, well, I got to just change their perception. Like, that's impossible. Lean into it.
I mean, these guys are slotted into the same pay no matter what. So there's not really, like we spoke earlier about incentive structures. Like he's not gonna get paid more if he does like any of this. Like he's gonna get paid the most they're allowed to pay him for the next 10 years,
Well,
unless his like legs blow up.
that's why
So
you gotta have your David Stern-esque exercise of hard power through soft power. I bet David Stern back in the day would threaten to have McDonald's remove you as a sponsor to use his influence. Maybe you got to do that behind the scenes. But I agree in accepting it and leaning into it. If you're not likable, the next best thing is being the opposite. And he's got some aspects of it. Guy was wearing a fur coat telling people that they'll try for the All-Star game if they get paid some money to do it. SGA, he might not be right for us loving him, but he could be right for some other purpose. Great stuff, Travis. Aaron Reyes, I was about to read his chat. I believe he was calling everybody complainers, and I want to get a sense of what he's saying about how we're all complainers now and call him up to the stage. Aaron, are
Yeah.
you on? Can you hear
Yes,
us?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you beautifully. Let's
Thanks.
hear your
I
perspective.
want to make sure you see my rock and Otani there.
Ah, okay.
So, um, look, I mean, SGA's game is like Iceman. I mean, I think that's the best analogy,
Mm.
baseline, one step, draw fouls, and people might not like that, whatever. He's 3 straight years of 30 points a game. Stop him, right? Whining and complaining, that's cute and all. Okay, these are pros, they can't stop him. So in the end, they like to say, okay, it's not box office. Look, we're in a transition now. It's a transition. You go through this in the NBA, and this is part of the problem in sports is that everyone lines up their business model for some kind of linear forever mode, and then you get a transition in a sport, right? You went through this with Brady to Mahomes and so on. That was pretty clean. That one worked out well. Well, that's if you run that scenario 10 times, it doesn't work out that way, right? You go through these choppy waters when you transition from, we saw it from the Jordan era. You had this sort of Kobe Shaq pop thing, but then it was clunky until you got this prior generation of stars. And now that generation's done. I mean, they might collect checks and be role players, but we have this new generation of players that are transitioning in, and everyone needs to just basically evolve from a sports media standpoint. Because everyone's rent seeking, is sitting back, trying to write the same lazy story over and over. And in the end, it's a new era. It's a new story. It's a new way. I mean, the interesting story is how are these Canadian players, who have, 100 times less development opportunities, able to play at a pretty elite level. That's an interesting story. And then how they're
Yes.
building their identity, that's very different than the traditional US NBA player identity. Like those to me are the interesting stories. Um,
I
so
don't know if in the US, I'm fascinated by Canadians. I'm fascinated by them and how they're like an uncanny valley in relation to
sure.
we Americans. But I don't know if others share my fascination. I don't know if my fellow Americans care at all about these people with slightly different accents who talk about going
Well, I
for a
mean,
rip.
look, there's a shift in leadership that has brought that to the fore in the last
Mm.
3 to 6 months, and you see a little more tude coming out of Canada. And if you watch
Mm.
any of the hockey of the last 2 months, I haven't seen Canadians as fired up as they've been, in a very long time. And of course, 32 years without winning the NHL, the Stanley Cup. Obviously, we'll do that too. But the point is that like there's a rivalry there. Like it is real, and it's been. And I would be honest. I think the sports industry has been lazy in constructing that rivalry, U.S. and Canada. And there's been narratives here, right? Whether it's in soccer with U.S. Canada, because they've become a lot better. Obviously, basketball is going through some renaissance with the Canadians. Maybe not gold medal level, but I'm not shocked if they're in the Final Four in
Yeah.
the
No,
in
there's
the
they've
Olympics
got
now.
talent.
The talent
They
they have, yeah,
I,
yeah.
I got a question for both of you that I've been
Sure.
okay.
thinking about when we talk about like the evolution of sports. So, Doris Burke called SGA like a free throw merchant.
Mm.
And we were talking about that earlier. Travis brought that up. When we were kids and he did like some type of like foul baiting, would there have been like, a Charles Oakley or a Dennis Rodman that the next time down the floor just clobbers him and is like, yeah, that's an effing foul? And
Mm.
that element has been gone from sports. I noticed that the other
Yeah.
day when
Mhm.
Ronald Acuna Jr. hit this home run against the Brewers. He stood there for like 10 seconds admiring it, flips the bat, and just like dances all around the bases.
Sure.
There would have been, when we were growing up, like a comeuppance for that. Like he would have gotten
Uh-huh.
drilled between the numbers at some point during the series. If you played like Harden or SGA and did some of this like foul sleight of hand, they would have knocked your ass hard to the floor. And
Yeah.
that doesn't happen really
So
with
I
the
would say
players
this
anymore.
as a counter, because the game has evolved, because we've gone into this long range game. I put in the chat like the all-time record of players with the most, career leaders in free throws. And these are monsters, right? So Karl Malone, number one, LeBron, Moses, Kobe, Harden, Oscar Robertson, Michael Jordan, Durant. I mean, these are monsters in this list. This is like all-time first, second, third team NBA history. So if SGA is quote unquote, a free throw merchant, what do you call Karl Malone? Right? I mean,
Real
Karl
I
Malone,
really
when he
big
could
and
do his
strong.
triple pivots and free throw merchanting. Well, the difference is Karl Malone could literally trebuchet you out of the stadium. So outside of people saying hello, Mr. Malone, that was if you were lucky, that
Mm.
was about where it was going to go. So I think we're kind of doing some sort of um, almost recency bias right? Like we already decide like, hey, I don't like SGA because of blank, and now I go
Yeah.
into my complaining mode, and we're sort of cherry picking on him, just because we don't think he's the star maker
Yeah.
of a new era.
Yeah, he wasn't marketed to us. We weren't
Yeah.
waiting for him to become that guy. And so I think that there's a little bit of discomfort with it happening. Now, his game is actually, I was astounded. I watched him in person when they played the
Sure.
Warriors, and there's something slippery about the way he moves that's rather
Yep.
incredible. But there's not anything necessarily identifiable that you associate with him. So we will continue this conversation about how the market perhaps the NBA's biggest superstar for the immediate future. But we thank you. We thank you for your thoughts. Very smart. I want to take a couple more. We've got a good flow with this. I recognize Paul Lawton's name from the BC
Oh,
group
boys.
chat right there. So let's get him on. Let's get him on the stage and get a take over here.
Yeah, how's it going, boys?
Hey,
Hey,
Listen, did Aaron just use trebuchet as a verb there? Shout
he
out to that
did.
guy,
There's
right?
a
I had to
D at
look
the
that
end of
up.
it.
Is
Yeah.
that I didn't realize that was a verb. Good job by him. Just on the pageantry note, the kind of the presentation of the finals, to my mind, the key ingredient missing is that link to history, right? You can have different graphics, you can have decals, you can have stickers, you can have patches, you can have court graphics, whatever. But this link to history that you have um, you have Christmas and Easter
Mm,
Catholics, and you have All-Star and Finals NBA fans. And when they tune in, I think you want them to have that link
yes.
to finals gone by, and I think you can do that. The actual presentation, the graphics, the whatever are secondary, but they have to convey that this finals is linked to the previous ones in history somehow. And
Yeah.
I think and I th-
I'm sorry, I don't want to
yeah, yeah,
interrupt,
yeah,
but there's a little bit of that. I think they're doing it in a lazy way. Where have you seen that they've got the photos whenever they cut to commercial of a past finals winner with a trophy? So they're conveying something, but I completely agree with you. And you know what moment really epitomized it for me was Tyrese Halliburton, a zoomer, a guy who wasn't sentient when Reggie Miller
yeah, yeah,
was
yeah,
at
yeah,
his peak. When he hits that
yeah, yeah,
shot against the Knicks, he turns, yeah, he
yeah,
does
yeah.
the choke. He does the choke. I think there's this misnomer. A lot of people in sports have it. A lot of people in general have it. It's almost overrating the extent to which the young disregard history and disregard the old. People want to be part of traditions.
Correct.
They want to be part of something that matters. And what matters is that which has mattered. And if you're not communicating that, and the NBA has traditionally struggled with it because there's so much the new league as opposed to baseball. I think you're really hurting yourself. And I think they've been like that. They've so rarely tried to be a tradition and so frequently talked about some futuristic TED Talk, international, I don't even know. That just leaves people feeling wanting. Or am I getting too dorm room stoned about it, Ryan?
yeah, it's there. Look, they didn't show the national anthem or the player introductions before these games because they're just jamming as many ads in as they can. I get it. They're paying a fortune. Disney's back is against the proverbial wall. Like stock price isn't moved in a decade, and these ads go for a lot of money. But it's not getting presented as this really super special event. And the good thing is that they've been like listening about this. Like Adam Silver has been acknowledging it, and he's like, yeah, I do kind of miss the Larry O'Brien trophy on the court. And then they superimpose it on the court and they get panned for it. But they're trying. They
Yeah.
they are listening to us more right now than I have felt that they have in the last decade.
And I
I
think
agree. Yes.
sorry, if I may, just the second point, I think the main issue is something that they can't fix, that's gotten um because it's been so successful. I think it's the inside the NBA has become bigger than the
Hmm.
product itself. Um, you've talked before about how obviously those guys denigrate current players, but it's not just that. It's the fact that that those guys, that show, I think is bigger than the product itself. It's bigger than any particular game, is bigger than any particular series. And so that becomes the important part. And if they're not talking about these finals and the historical link to any previous ones, it, and when they do, it's only just to make themselves, their own careers look better by denigrating current teams. I think that's where the issue is. But that's, it's so successful that you can hardly do anything about that.
Yeah, and it's so hard to do something about it because what people love is their authenticity. And what those old retired players on Inside the NBA feel authentically are often negative things about the current generation. So Adam Silver can carp and he does carp, and they don't like it when they dump on the product. But you just can't get those guys to be something they're not. Let's take one more. I mean, we're getting so behind in the show schedule, but I love your questions and I can't help it. Jack Long has been waiting for a while. He has a glorious beard. Let's get a question from him and then we'll get back on track. Maybe talk a little Nike, Caitlin Clark, one of our common topics, but it seems like other people are getting on that one. But let's hear from Jack first before we get to that one.
Yeah. I guess the league that I think does the history and whatnot well is the NHL with the Stanley Cup and the way they present it. And, it does seem like, it's funny because the NHL seems to be having the opposite issue where a lot of the young superstars are American. The rookie of the year this year, Lane Hudson, was American. The guy who won both the Vezina for best goalie and the league MVP is also American in Hellebuck. So it is this sort of interesting opposites. But the thing I've noticed is with the ratings being low, and I watch the product, I'm a Panthers fan, but it's not on broadcast TV. And I was wondering, what do you think the role of over-the-air broadcast TV is going to be in the future with all these sports? Because it does seem like the only way to get ratings now is through over-the-air broadcast.
Yeah, their ratings have not been good. And I know so little about hockey, but even I, as just a casual sports fan, that ESPN NHL song, when that's not present, when that's not there for a big hockey moment, that makes me feel bad. And when it's funny because we're talking about ESPN being cheap and feeling a little tawdry and having less gravitas. And yet when it goes to Turner for hockey, I feel that the other way. And I'm going, this feels, I don't know, this feels kind of weird. And the only thing we can really agree on, I suppose, is that network TV feels like an event, but the TV industry is collapsing altogether. And so I think what we were watching might just be the nichification of sports writ large outside of the NFL. And when we see these ratings for the NBA finals, and you're not even getting to 10 million for these games, we can say that the NBA did this and that wrong. And Clay Travis can say that they went woke, but it just seems like this is part of a broader macro phenomenon. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, it goes back and to the last thing about like inside the NBA feeling bigger than the NBA. Our friend Nate Jones brings this up all the time. There's the pre-social media monoculture, and then there's the post-fragmentation of society, probably starting around like the 2010, 2012 era. And so, Shaq and Barkley are just so much more famous than SGA and Tyrese Halliburton are. And I don't know how any of these new sports stars catch up.
That is well said. It is invariance. We will continue to monitor it on Random Offense. Thanks so much, Jack. I want to, you know what? I have not planned out, Ryan, what this segment might be called, but I feel like we do a thing in private often where we're wondering if we're driving the conversation. People don't know how grandiose we are in private. We are very grandiose, and we're often wondering when we see a topic catch hold if we cause that. Maybe we'll get a graphic for it for the next time you come on. We'll call it "Are We Wagging the Dog?" Because I look at the Caitlin Clark conversation. I want to stay away from it. I've talked about it a lot. Caitlin Clark and Nike. And it just seems like it's reaching this point where it's mainstream now to talk about how Nike is ignoring her. There was this story that SI put out there, these other aggregators, I don't know how true it is, about how Nike is going to have a Caitlin Clark logo by the holiday, meaning Thanksgiving or Christmas, which just sounds insane. They should have a shoe already, and maybe they'll have a logo for her in a few months. I
And
don't
that's
know if
after the season.
yeah, I don't know of the veracity of any of that, but that topic was there. We were sharing this guy, former Nike worker. He did this viral thing on why the hell haven't they promoted Caitlin Clark? Part of me felt like we should have gotten some credit, or at least I should have gotten some credit if I'm being honest. Do you think that we're reaching a mainstream Caitlin Clark's magnitude acceptance and how she's been denied? You recently wrote on Front Office Sports about how her absence has caused this collapse in the
That
WNBA
actually
rating.
wasn't me. That was Colin Sallow.
Oh, well, I'm
And
sorry. I see you
as
breaking every other story. I forget sometimes. But yes, it was in Front Office Sports, I should say. You broke the Anthony Slater to ESPN story, which we might talk about.
yes,
But yes,
maybe.
continue.
But yeah, so what's interesting is Jeff Zilgett at USA Today, a guy who has very loudly been like, I don't care about the ratings don't matter. He's been saying that for years, and as recently as 2 weeks ago, he comes from like the clouds of with a story that WNBA ratings are down 50% without Caitlin Clark. We've looked into it at FOS, and by we I mean Colin, who is one of our younger writers, and I think he's a very big riser in the industry. And I don't know that you can say that it's down like 50%. The closest apples to apples comparison that he could find was that a CBS game without her was about 30% down.
Mm.
Versus a CBS game with her. Now, look, I'd get kind of pedantic about this. Like 30% is a lot, but it's smaller than 50%. And I don't know exactly how Zilgett came across these numbers since he hasn't seemed to be somebody curious about how these things work in the past. And now all of a sudden he's able to, find what games are rated on NBA TV and Ion. But it did get very noticed this week that ratings are down a lot without Clark. And to your point, a lot more people are starting to be like, what the hell is Nike doing? Like they are just, there's this like meme on social media where people at work are enhancing shareholder value and
Mm.
Nike's not doing that. And like what are they like, who are they servicing by slow rolling this? It doesn't make any sense.
It just seems like there's an obvious ideological component within the company where they're worried about backlash from a
And it's
very
also
small.
weird, like we've talked in the past that it's like to elevate Asia Wilson and give her flowers and kind of guard against her feelings about being overshadowed. And it's like the ironic thing is that Nafisa Collier is like passing her now as the best player in the WNBA, and I think most people are recognizing that, and so they are throwing this like Asia Wilson parade, like late.
Well, nobody's talking about Asia Wilson is what's happening because that league is terrified to criticize its athletes for the most part. And there's been this big Nike rollout about what a dominant player Wilson is, and you just don't hear it. So you're just not hearing about her. They did this rollout for a player who's fourth in jersey sales for a signature shoe that they've delayed the Caitlin Clark shoe for, which is insane. And now to what you're saying, no one's talking. It's just a loss leader. And they're running the ads for the Asia Wilson shoe during the NBA finals.
And they're not
The
printing that many of these shoes. And Nate has made like another point that people are starting to buy fake Caitlin Clark shoes, like in like the Kobe mode, and that
yeah.
they're actually like fine sneakers. Like there used to be this stigma against wearing counterfeit Nike shoes, and you would look like a dork for doing it. But the Gen Zers or whatever don't have that same stigma, and they're just getting like these 3D printed Caitlin Clark Nike fake Kobe shoes, and like it's like replacing buying real Nikes because they're not satisfying this demand.
This company is a mess. It's a mess. And I talked about it a year ago. I talked about it 2 years ago. I talked about it a few years ago. And I used to get all this pushback from people acting like I was crazy because, I mean, this is Nike. It's one of the most successful businesses in American history. But look at the situation they're in. We've talked about this. We've talked about how they've had Caitlin Clark, the most popular athlete maybe in American sports, or at least in the running, most popular women's athlete, certainly. All these companies are making money off her. Dick's Sporting Goods is saying that we're putting her merch in every single one of our stores across the country. Gatorade and State Farm, they can't stop making ads about this woman. Nike's refusing to, which is crazy. And they've got her wearing Kobe Bryant shoes, which for the most part they're not making because they have no idea how to handle the situation because obviously he's tragically deceased. And Vanessa Bryant, his wife, runs the division. So they don't even know how to make these shoes that Clark is wearing. This is just a really mismanaged situation. And I guess now, after all this pushback that I've gotten, that you've probably gotten, more and more mainstream voices are going, yeah, maybe big bad Nike doesn't know what it's doing. And they've been run by people who are acting like idiots. I won't say they're idiots. I don't know what pressures they're under, but they're acting very irrational, is what I would say.
Yeah, you assume that like if you make it to one of these institutions, and you could call like Nike, the Harvard or Yale of sneakers. Well, now you also look at Harvard and Yale and see some of the decisions they're making about their brands, and you question what they're doing. And so I think that what the last 5 or 10 years has done is erode our confidence in this idea that these institutions are as elite as we've thought they are and as they think they are.
I think that's certainly so. And watching them do effectively a Potemkin shoe launch, and look, NBA Finals ratings might be down. They're not down that much to where it's cheap to run that ad space right there for a shoe that it just doesn't look like they're selling a whole lot of. So let's take a question from Craig. Craig was he was just an awesome question asker / comment maker last time. And then we can do the HR, no HR. Craig, what you
Craig on
got
a
for us?
Friday. That's a thematically appropriate.
Oh,
One
what
of
is
my
it?
so one of my favorite articles you wrote was about the tundra tier in the NFL.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah.
And this isn't that related, but when I think of the NHL, it just seems so strange to me that Canadians haven't won anything since 1993. I'm in Florida, and Florida teams have won 3 Stanley Cups since 2021. Tampa Bay twice, Florida Panthers once, and Florida Panthers could easily win it again. So is there a reason why that weather disparity is there at the NHL? Obviously, it's very different because the NHL doesn't matter whether you're in Fort Lauderdale or Edmonton, it's still a hockey stadium. So weather's not the same way. But why is Florida so good at hockey versus Canada?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the weather component, Craig. I thought about it more in terms of pressure, which is just that the Canadian and the cold weather cities put all this pressure on these teams, and you can be loosey-goosey and free to lose in Florida, which might help you. But maybe there's a weather component. I should explain. The reason that you got such a big reaction out of me is that sometimes I'll do an article that's off the beaten path of what I usually do. And I want to feel that's the one I really want praise for, so that you liked it. And the article topic was about how the NFL is effectively 2 different sports, the AFC and the NFC. They're dramatically different in terms of what is asked of quarterbacks in performing during weather conditions. And I felt like this was such an underrated subject because people would say, oh, this guy can't play in weather. That's a problem. And my thought is in the NFL, it's a problem in the AFC. It can be a problem in the NFC, or you could be Drew Brees playing in a dome in the NFC, and you might go 10 years in between playing a game that matters in cold weather. So I can't remember exactly how I did it, but Tundra tier, I think, was cities with lows in January below 30 or 25. And it's like bottom line is that there are, I think, 7 cold weather cities in AFC, and in the NFC, there are way fewer. So anyway, I'm getting derailed. You've got a good theory. I'll look into it. That's my
Jack
summary
Long
on the whole
in the
thing.
chat brought up the
No state
biz
income
point
tax.
about state income tax, which
Oh,
was, that's going to be a big issue in sports. And I really do think that the salary caps should normalize it, because when you have like Florida and Texas teams effectively being able to pay players 10% more than like teams from like New York, California, Illinois, it creates a disparity at the amount of money that these athletes are making, and it should be normalized. Like there's no way that the Florida teams should have like 10% more money to spend on players than the California teams.
Perhaps it should for the health of those leagues, but maybe as a Californian, I want there to be more pressure on the governance here to lessen taxes.
They don't seem to have any pressure.
Yeah, they don't
Like
seem to
these
care.
these strongholds, like the people who care about it just leave, and the left gets more entrenched.
Yeah, I'm not going to weigh in on Alex Padilla, my senator, getting crashing the Christie Nome press conference and getting tackled and arrested and perhaps manhandled. But my main takeaway from that was, oh, yeah, that's that guy. That's the senator. Because out in California, you don't even really get introduced to these people. It's just rubber stamp because it's one party. And this was the first time. I went down a rabbit hole of learning everything I could about the guy because he had been my senator without really my ever having been made aware of anything about him beyond the name. But let's roll up HR, no HR. It's a little bit of a little bit of a topic that speaks to the idiosyncrasies of the sports industry, folks. Let's roll that graphic. Let's roll it. Yes.
And oh, by the way, just in case he was talking about me, my brother, I'm not going away.
No, you're not.
I'm going to be here for a while. You said, read the news? I'm going to be here for a while. So next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that, I'm going to be here. And players far more accomplished and far more superior have made their efforts trying to call me out. How has that worked out?
Classic Stephen A right there. So the idea of HR, no HR is that in sports, it's not the typical incentives where you will get fired or sanctioned for normal stuff at your work, but it's different in sports. And I look to that as an example, Ryan, of, and I just throw this out there because people are complaining about this. What you saw right there, if you don't have full context, is Stephen A. Smith being very aggressive towards the star of the Indiana Pacers, Tyrese Halliburton, during the NBA Finals and making some sort of, I mean, not a physical threat, but a threat of that nature, to use Stephen A. Smith lingo. And I think I throw it up to you. Would you sanction him if you're Jimmy Pitaro? Is this your chance to say, hey, you can't talk that way in the middle of the NBA Finals and use the platform as such? You're under contract with us, and this is a time to show how serious we are. Or is that draconian, Ryan?
They can't do that because they just gave him a 5-year, $100 million deal, and they gave him that to continue to be Stephen A. Smith. And so that's Stephen A. being Stephen A. He's been doing that bit for when did he tell Kevin Durant, you don't want to make an enemy out of me? Because that was when that started, and he's been doing that bit ever since. And so
I should have done that with KD. That's what I should have done. That should have been my move when Durant got mad at me. But wouldn't the counter argument though, Ryan, be that, well, they've locked him up contractually, so what is Stephen A going to do if the company puts out a statement? He's a team player, he's a good soldier for the most part. I just think it's emblematic of a complaint people are having about how crazy it's gotten and how ESPN is talking about ESPN when it really should be talking about the NBA Finals. And it just seems like something that shouldn't be happening.
The weirdest thing I've like noticed with how they're discussing Halliburton is like they act like he has something to prove to them, but he has driven this team like against considerable odds to take a 2-1 lead in the NBA Finals. They were supposed to lose to the Cavs. They were supposed to lose to the Knicks. They were supposed to be getting crushed now. They have a 2-1 lead. He has made like a historically significant amount of clutch shots. He has this interesting personality that they should want to be marketing around as like a long-term thing. And you've got Stephen A doing this. You've had like Jay Williams scowling about him all week. I need him to be more consistent. Like, okay, yeah, he did it now. They have a 2-1 lead, but like now you got to do it again. It's like, okay, like who made you the emperor of what like Tyrese Halliburton needs to do? Like Jay Williams, just like I don't know. This is a little bit of a pet topic with me, but I like feel like a very like negative, anxious energy when he's on the air. Stephen A is different because I know that he is like playing this wrestling character and there's some charm to him. And I think that that is actually the thing that we showed at the beginning, as weird as it is, it's also kind of funny. But like there is like I just don't understand why the whole like platform of sports talk has been to find like what's negative about these people in the finals and harp on it.
Yeah, I think they're looking for some sort of heat. And it's easier when it's negative to have a conversation about it. I'm sure we do that here. It's not like we're going, hey, they've done a great job presenting the finals and so much is going well. That's no fun. It's more fun to do an autopsy. Well, maybe fun's not the right word, but you can say more about an autopsy than when something's going well. That's how it goes. And they've got a lot of sports talk hours to fill, so it makes sense. But it does seem like they don't feel much of a responsibility to increase the gravitas and the grandeur of the product. And I think in the case of their biggest personality, he, especially of late, he's always had a big personality. He's always had an ego. And we find him charming. We find him charismatic, but it almost seems like it's in overdrive. Did you see that clip of Molly Karam telling him to close his laptop? It just felt like a diva moment on the air. I don't know if you caught it because you were
I
too
didn't. I
busy.
missed that one.
You were reporting Anthony Slater, my friend. This is how good a reporter Ryan is. He breaks these stories about people you know in your life before you even know about him, going to the aforementioned ESPN. So, anyway, so yeah, you are not for sanctioning Stephen A. Smith. Well, you know what? You've
Well,
agreed.
I'm
You
not. It's
convinced
not
me.
that I'm not for sanctioning for him. It's that they don't have any leverage right now. They just gave him this 5-year, $100 million deal to be him. He alluded to that. He's like, "Have you read the news? I'm not going anywhere." It's like, yeah, he's not, and they don't. There's nothing that they can do right now. The time to sanction him would have been a year ago when he needed to finalize this deal.
Well, you've been fantastic, Ryan. As have the question askers. We've got a bit of a hard out. We try to end on the hour ish. I will give you the floor to tell anybody about stories to be on the lookout for. I might have already stepped on your whole plug, but plug away and I'll say goodbye to everybody. They've been wonderful.
The story I did with Ben Horney on FanDuel and Kalshi having talks, I'm not gonna be able to describe it all right now, but you guys should go read that if you're interested in the future of the sports betting industry.
It's the glass man. He's the best in the business. I won't even allow him to interrupt me and tell me that's not the case. I feel it's the
Do we get
case.
to do on the two-way? Do we do the good job by you?
Oh, we can do whatever we want, man. It's a loosey goosey, and I would extend the good job by you when we do it to all of you who tune in and ask questions. We're building something really cool here, in my opinion, and you all were wonderful. So, like we always say, Ryan, good job
Good
by
job by
you.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.